Finding your musical taste a little bit bland, lacking in colour, find it all a bit boring. What you need in your life is some pomp rock. So what the hell's pomp rock? And why am I talking about it now? I'll tell you why. Because I watched the Queen's funeral last week, and all the usual cliches came to mind. Oh, no one does pomp like the British. And then I remembered my record collection. I thought, actually, Americans are pretty damn good at pomp. It's just they don't do it in Westminster Abbey. They do it on vinyl. So I'm going to do my top 10 pomp records of all time. And that's my top 10, not your top 10. So don't give me a hard time. And some of you may be saying, what the hell is pomp rock? So I'm going to give a little definition. To me, it's a mix of prog and AOR. It's made by musicians for whom technical virtuosity and strong melodies are just as important as one another. It's kind of what would happen if Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Queen and Journey had a threesome and one of them got knocked up and had a squalling baby boy. What are its distinguishing marks? I suppose melody, of course, soaring, multi-layered harmony vocals, keyboard overkill, and that is overkill, synth to the max, classical piano motifs. You got to have castrato vocals, although not always, but that tends to be the way it goes. Heavy guitars, a complete absence of a sense of humour, because this is pomp rock, it's pompous. And to that end, you need some overblown lyrics, normally singing about something that happened in another century or something that never happened because it's pure fantasy. There'll be lots of time changes, a reluctance generally to keep things simple. There'll be melodrama. It's pompous, remember. But strip away all the fancy stuff and what you're left with is radio-friendly AOR. It's just melodic rock in a silly hat. So look out for lots of hair, moustaches, satin outfits which would get you beaten up in your average pub. And very often the records will feature an out-of-place barroom boogie track from the band's days of playing the chicken in the basket circuit. So now you know what it is. I'll tell you what my top 10 are. Okay, so number 10, starting us off, is an album that always features in aficionados' top 10s of pomp, normally a lot higher than 10. So why am I not putting it higher? Because it has some of the defining moments of pomp on here, but some of the tracks are just plain old hard rock, and there's even disco elements coming in places. And it's Roadmaster's Sweet Music. The cover says pomp. The outfits definitely say pomp. They would pass the getting beat up in a pub test. And on here, the final 3 tracks, Higher Higher, Circle of Love and Sweet Music, are what this album's all about when you're wanting to hear pomp. Higher Higher just has the most euphoric, layered vocals imaginable. Just take it to heaven, and synths upon synths. I imagine when they recorded it, the tape was running very, very thin after all the overdubs. And the title track, Sweet Music, it's got time changes, it's got mellotron, it's got solid heavy guitar, ridiculously layered vocals again, a big dumb chorus. And this is one of the standard bearers of pomp, Roadmaster. And their next couple of albums are well worth checking out as well. Sweet Music. And number 9 is an album by a band who are often compared to Styx. And Styx may feature on this list. Spoiler alert, but hey, it's going to happen. And it's a band out of Canada called Zon, and their album, Astral Projector. And again, this is just one of those albums that always gets mentioned when pomp is mentioned. Again, the cover art is pomp. The band's look is most definitely pomp. Song titles, Man in the Mirror, Astral Projector, put on the show. Pretty pomp. There you go. Not taking themselves remotely seriously. And this comes on extremely unlimited edition blue vinyl. Probably harder to find a regular black vinyl copy than it is a blue vinyl copy. And yeah, like I say, the Styx influence is definitely there. But I hear also a bit of a Genesis influence, and certainly the vocalist was influenced by Peter Gabriel visually, if not vocally, because he was very partial to sticking a mask on and acting out the songs when they played live. So you get your melodrama, you get the artiness, all a little bit ridiculous. And you can just about see a picture of the singer there in one of his masks. And looking at this inner sleeve, it's interesting to see that the singer also plays some cello. Well, you would, wouldn't you? And the keyboard player actually plays two keyboards. I assume they're keyboards I've never even heard of before, and that's how pomp they are. The Davolicint and the Selena. Never heard of them. There's clavinets, there's organ, ground and electric pianos, mini Moog, poly Moog. It's all on there. And this is a really good album. Whether it's my favourite Zon album, perhaps not. I like the Back Down to Earth album that followed this, and their best song is on that, as far as I'm concerned, which is Gods and Kings. Again, what a pomp title that is. But overall, this is the most pomp statement of intent, and definitely one to look out for. Like I say, the vocals, they're Styx-like, but even more pompous and stagey and melodramatic than Dennis DeYoung ever managed. I have to be in the right mood to listen to this album, because if I'm not, it is just so over the top. But yeah, once heard, never forgotten. And classic cover. Zon Astral Projector. And number 8, a band who got a fair-sized back catalogue, but this is their most pomp album. Other times they're just more straight-ahead arena rock. They even sort of bordered on power pop at times. It's Angel, and their self-titled album. Again, great Pomp Rock sleeve. It's on the Casablanca label. And this is just pomp from beginning to end. I mean, there's some breathers on the odd track where they get a little more sort of basic hard rock, but it starts off with the epic song, The Tower, and it's ludicrous. There's mellotron on there, there's flute, there's an urgency and intensity that is matched by bands like Rage Against the Machine, except this lot are singing about, I don't know what they're singing about, freeing some damsel in distress from a tower, or who knows, fantasy nonsense, but they sing about it like their lives depend on it. And it's fantastic. Over the top, helium vocals from beginning to end. Loud sections, quiet sections, time changes. There's synth solos on here, with multiple synths going on at the same time. It sounds like a lightsaber fight on one of the Star Wars films. It's ludicrous. So this, for the track Tower alone, deserves to be in the top 10. Greg Jeffrey on keyboards is fantastic. I loved what he did in his later band Jeffrey, and then again in House of Lords. And the Jeffrey album nearly made it onto this list, but I decided it was just a bit too hard rock, even though it's got all the pomp elements still. But amazing stuff. Like I say, there's mellotron, synths, great chunky heavy guitars on here. There's one track, I need to check my notes. Broken Dreams starts side 2, which to me almost sounds like it's a tale of a woman done him wrong. And with Ozzy singing, I could imagine it being an effective Black Sabbath song. But of course, it's not Ozzy singing. It's some guy who sounds like he's got himself caught in his zip. So it doesn't sound at all like a Sabbath song, but it could do. The album finishes with the Angel theme, which is just an instrumental piece, which again, that Ozzy theme, it sounds a bit like the intro, the keyboard intro to Mr. Crowley. So yeah, this is a great album. Totally over the top. If you don't like this, I totally understand, because it is so over the top and it is so straight-faced. But it's a classic. And one of the great things about Angel was the band's logo. Not that logo. On later albums, they had this logo, which was particularly interesting because it read the same thing both ways up. And whoever came up with that was an absolute genius. So there you go, that's Angel at number 8. So I said that Pomp's kind of an American phenomenon, but of course there were British bands doing it, and one of the better ones was Magnum. And that doesn't show up great because it's a foil sleeve and it's ring worn and it's reflecting all the stuff behind me, but that is Magnum-II. And for me, it's one of their best albums. This before they started singing about love constantly and doing songs aimed specifically to try and get them on the radio, which didn't particularly work, or didn't work for long. But when they were a pure Pomp band was when I loved them. And this album has it all. I mean, it starts with about 5-minute track, which is a very anti-commercial way of starting your album, particularly when there's a 45-second or so keyboard, atmospheric synth wash to start the track. The vocals are overwrought, which is Bob Catley's way, and live he was always doing the kind of dramatic hand gestures to try and kind of illustrate what he was trying to get across in the lyrics. But this is a great album. There's a ton of synths on here, loads of piano. They're very keen on their piano, Magnum are or were. Fair bit of acoustic guitar, nice contrast to the really chunky, heavy guitars of Tony Clarkin. And it is pure Pomp. Great tracks on here: Foolish Heart, Firebird, The Battle, Changes, all well worth checking out, and just shows the Brits could do it as well as the Americans, even if they were kind of copying them a little bit. Certainly Magnum, I think, got described at times as the sort of the British Kansas, and there are Kansas elements, but there's Queen in here, and there's a certain distinct Britishness. There's a track Firebird starts off with just acoustic guitar and Bob Catley singing. It sounds like some medieval kind of wandering minstrel singing. And then, of course, the heavy guitars come in and it goes full Pomp. But that's part of the pompousness. This kind of harking back to another time. Great album, great band. So number 6 is a lesser known band, but they're still fully deserving of being in my top 10. And it's the Dixon House Band and their album Fighting Alone. And it's fairly obscure, but it is a great album. Dixon House is the name of the leader of the band, the keyboard player. He plays synths and piano. And this is light, uplifting Pomp, which sort of mixes Styx and Queen, I guess. Styx with a sort of instrumentation, and Queen for the vocal harmonies. Superb album. Highlights in here, I suppose, are the opening track, Sooner or Later, which starts off with almost like a Supertramp type keyboard intro and then goes full on Pomp in a Styx style. And then there's a track on the B-side called The Promise, which just features the most euphoric Queen style vocal harmonies you'll ever hear. Absolutely amazing track. And Howard Lees from Heart guests on guitar on a couple of tracks. So it's worth checking out for that reason alone. But yeah, it's a really, really great album. And unjustly overlooked, I think. Dixon House Band. Number 5, and we're back in Great Britain again. And a band who got lumped in with the new wave of British heavy metal. But like a lot of the bands in that scene, they had very little in common with their compatriots, their label mates. They just happened to play guitars at a time when it wasn't terribly fashionable. And Saracen had heavy metal elements, but they're most definitely a pomp band and relied as much on melody and synthesizers and that kind of thing as they did on brutal guitar riffs. So Saracen, Hero, Saints and Fools, which is a classic of the new wave of British heavy metal. Didn't have an awful lot in common with bands like Saxon, Iron Maiden, but still got lumped in with them. And it starts off with the track Crusader, which is 7 minutes long, which is a great way to start an album. It starts with wordless vocals. There's a ton of synths in here, some great guitar, some ominous over-the-top backing vocals. And it's a great way to set out their stall, I guess. The end of the first side is a track called Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which is 6.5 minutes long, and has some really great sort of Uriah Heep style harmony vocals on it. The title track, over 7.5 minutes long, also a superb track, and reminds me a bit, I guess, of a cross between Kansas and Asgard. Really good stuff. I mean, it's a mixture again of the whole album is acoustic guitar, heavy electric guitar, some great drumming throughout, tons of synths, fantastic stuff. And final track on the album, Ready to Fly, which is 8 minutes 20 seconds long, features an incredible wah-wah guitar solo. I mean, the track is all about the guitar, but the synth washers and stuff on there as well root it firmly in Pomp. So if you see this one, I thoroughly recommend picking it up. Absolutely fantastic album of British pomp rock. At number 4, and I've already told you they're going to be in the list, but didn't tell you where or which album. It's Styx and their album Equinox, which to me is probably their most pomp album, although that's open to debate. Came out in 1975, so it's before Tommy Shaw joined the band. And they were still harbouring a lot of prog aspirations, I suppose you could say, on this album. But because it Styx, the melodies are huge. Ton of great harmonies on here. You've got stagey melodrama of Dennis DeYoung's vocals. You've got the radio staple, certainly in the States. I don't think I've ever heard it on the radio over here, but Lorelei, I'm reliably informed, got played at one time on the radio in the States a fair bit. And it's great commercial, proggy pomp rock. You've got the odd James Young track like Midnight Ride, where it's more meat and potatoes hard rock, but to be honest, tracks like that are a bit of a sort of breather before you go into the full-on assault of the pomp rock that makes up the rest of the album. And I suppose the centrepiece of this album is the final track, Sweet Madam Blue. It's preceded by Prelude 12, which is a kind of a John Kurlovsky guitar piece, which is an absolute rip-off of the Yes track And You and I. So I have to refer to my notes there. And then it leads into Sweet Madam Blue, which is pretty much a rip-off of Led Zeppelin's Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. But then it goes full-on pomp and becomes epic and sprawling, and you forget about the fact they may have slightly borrowed from some of their influences, and you just marvel at what a great pomp rock album this is. So yeah, Styx, Prelude, and I could have picked a bunch of their albums, but this is the one that's been doing it for me most at the moment. So Styx at number 4. Now number 3, an album that if you were just going on the lyrical content, you might just think it was pure AOR melodic rock. But because of the keyboards on here and the song structures and the sprawling nature of some of the songs, you're left in no doubt at all that this is prime pomp rock, and it's Touch's one and only album. And this is an absolute classic of the genre. My top 3 I've been shuffling around. This was at number 1 for a while, but some tough decisions had to be made. Came out on the Aviary label in 1980. And Touch were in fact the first band ever to take the stage at the inaugural Monsters of Rock Festival at Castle Donington. And famously, the singer swallowed a bee on stage. I may have mentioned this story before on one of my previous videos, but he swallowed a bee on stage. I wasn't there. I don't know whether he soldiered on despite that, quite Spinal Tap-like disaster. But can't have done much for his singing voice. But this is one of Mark Mangold's many projects. He'd previously been in American Tears in the mid-70s, and they produced pompy hard rock. He's been in bands since, such as Drive, She Said, and he's a keyboard legend. And this album is slathered in amazing synths, amazing keyboards. The subject matter tends to be love, and I did say in my introduction that wasn't really what Pomp was about. It had to be about fantasy themes or stuff from previous centuries, but they approach the subject from a slightly different angle. Song titles like My Life Depends on You. It's a little bit melodramatic and over the top. And there are tracks like Black Star and When the Spirit Moves You that definitely have more of a Pomp lyrical feel to them. This is a superb album. Funny enough, when I first bought this, I bought it because I loved the track Don't You Know What Love Is, which kicks off the album. And I played that song to death and kind of ignored the rest of the album. I didn't think the rest of it quite lived up to it. But over the years, I've realised that as a whole, this is such a great album. And like I say, the Pomp elements are all there. Everything you could want. The time changes, the massed harmonies, heavy guitars, synth overload. It's superb and highly deserving of its number 3 place. Perhaps it should be higher. Perhaps tomorrow I would make it higher, but today, Touch are at number 3. Oh, I forgot to mention. Apparently there was a second album recorded with Todd Rundgren producing, which has never seen the light of day. And I would love to hear that. Somewhere that will be on tape, no doubt, in some archive. And perhaps one day we'll hear it. Perhaps it's already out and I just haven't had my ear to the ground, but that would be worth hearing. Number 2, an album that I've loved for so long, ever since I heard the lead-off single from it. And it's not typical of the band. And I guess the music they made following this and the long history of the band before this album came out has tainted some people's view of this album. But to me, this is an absolute Pomp classic and stands alone in their catalogue. And it's Freedom at Point Zero by Jefferson Starship. And the lead-off single of this album is Jane, which, when that was in the charts, I was just gobsmacked by it. And that in itself probably isn't a Pomp track, but it is certainly ambitious AOR with multi-facets to it, even little reggae sections, much like Spirit of Radio by Rush. You got Mickey Thomas on vocals here. There's no Grace Slick on this album, or not officially anyway. I sometimes wonder if I can hear her in the backing vocals, but so Mickey Thomas lead vocals. You got Ainsley Dunbar on drums. He's incredible on this album. And Jane is a great single, but it's not the best thing on this album. There's a lot of Pomp on here. There's the odd little, I suppose, folky elements, a bit like some of the earlier Jefferson Starship albums. The track Lightning Rose has that sort of folky element. But tracks like Awakening are just, to me, they epitomise what is Pomp rock. You've got this atmospheric opening with thunder and lightning and rain coming down, and it reminds me of Concerto for a Rainy Day by Electric Light Orchestra. And that track goes through so many different stages. It builds beautifully. You've got most incredible Craig Chiquiko guitar solo on there. Spectacular vocals from Mickey Thomas. It's just everything you want from a Pomp track. Yeah, I mean, there's even sort of classical motifs in there. You definitely get that feel that it's a marriage of prog and melodic rock and just exceptional musicianship. And the other track, I'll check my notes here. The other track on here that's really very much Pomp rock is Just the Same. Lots of tinkling ivories on here, great guitar riff, and then it goes into a guitar line that's very similar to Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. And again, it's just ambitious, classically inspired melodic rock, Pomp rock, and the whole album is exceptional. And if you're put off Jefferson Starship because you didn't like Jefferson Airplane, or you put off Jefferson Starship because you didn't like the Starship albums that followed, which aren't very good, or even if you've heard other Jefferson Starship albums that just don't float your boat, the ones with Grace Slick singing, and I can understand that because there's some good material on those, but none of them to me is absolutely killer. But this is where it all came together for me. And I don't miss Grace Slick on this album one bit, much as I admire her and I do like her voice. This would not be the same album with her on it. And it's an incredible piece of work. And it's Pomp through and through. So Jefferson Starship, Freedom Point Zero at number 2. And so what's number 1? Well, it's here, I think, because it is Pomp through and through, from beginning to end. It never lets up. And this is an album that I bought it, when would it have been? 30 odd years ago. And I bought it just because I thought the guys in the back cover looked cool. In fact, I think the American release, the picture on the back cover is on the front cover and vice versa. And I remember being disappointed because I thought it would be more of a heavy rock album. And it's definitely not a heavy rock album. It sounds like a cross between Queen and ELO and Sparks and art rock, a little bit of prog thrown in, lots of melody. And I think I offloaded the album at some point a few years later, and I rebought it at some point. I just thought, what on earth did I ever get rid of this album for? It's an absolute classic. Okay, it's Aviary and their self-titled album, which came out in 1979. Great cover. In the days before Photoshop, that was a pretty admirable attempt at putting wings on a jumbo jet, I suppose, or bird wings on a jumbo jet. And there's the band. And the singer, Brad Love, the main guy in the band. And yeah, I thought this would probably sound like, I don't know, like Coney Hatch or some other Canadian hard rock band, even though these guys are American. And it's a spectacular Pomp rock album. It starts with a track called Soaring, which is exactly what it does. It soars. Listening to it, you almost feel like you're a bird in flight. It just elevates you so much. And this album's kind of stagey in its presentation, I suppose. Almost a musical theatre type presentation to the songs, but don't let that put you off. Musical theatre is not something I'm into, but I suppose it's just because it's dramatic, and it's very hard to put that much drama into a song without it starting to feel a bit stagey. There's some unusual song structures on here as well, which probably adds to that stagey feel. There's masses of drama. There's some orchestration as well, but the orchestration is done with a light touch and only where it's needed. And it isn't needed that much because there are synths all over here. There's time changes. There's ludicrous songwriting decisions which just all seem to work. So yeah, it starts with Soaring, which is fantastic. Then Anthem for the USA follows that, which is a quirky, almost new wavy sounding pomp track. Definitely sort of elements of ELO around the time Discovery on there. Then there's a track called Puddles, and that's almost got a sort of a Noel Coward type vocal delivery, almost kind of thing Freddie Mercury would do on A Night at the Opera. Again, it's the kind of thing that's going to divide people. It'll either make you throw up or you'll think it's the greatest thing you've ever heard. And you can see why, as a young metalhead, when I bought this, it took me aback a little bit. But time and maturity, I guess, and just becoming more broad-minded in my musical tastes has made me appreciate this album for what it is. I'm not quite going to do a track by track rundown on this album because it kind of deserves it, but I think it gets boring when I describe every track in detail. But you've got moments which are Beatlesque, like Mystic Sharon. But it's Beatlesque, but with a Queen Supertramp kind of a feel as well. You've got ludicrous layering of vocals on there, and Brian May-like guitar. You've got super uplifting pomp in places with fizzy synths, and on a track like Feel the Heart, the vocal sounds so much like Justin Hawkins from Darkness. I wonder if he's owned this album from an early age and modelled himself on Brad Love, because it's uncannily similar to his vocal style. So I can't say enough good things about this album, I really can't. It's so ambitious, it's so arty in its scope. It doesn't seem to have any regard for commerciality or what will sell. It's just a piece of art, it really is. Absolutely incredible piece of music. And yeah, it's number one. It's number one for a reason. I've come back to it over the years. I got rid of it once, like I say. I came back to it, I bought it again. There's a reason for that, because it's a really special album. And if you're interested in prog, or this has whet your appetite, then you really need to get yourself a copy. So Aviary at number one. There you go, Pomp Rock, whether you like it or not. That's what you got this time around. I seem to be an expert at making videos that have a very niche appeal, but you know, no one else is talking about these albums, so I feel like I've got to. I want people to know about these bands. I think these bands deserve to be heard, so give them a listen if you know them. I'd love to compare notes with you. Leave some comments, leave suggestions of what would be in your top 10, and trust me, anything you suggest I'd probably considered and very reluctantly left out, and I may feature those in another video at another time, but this is my top 10. Hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.